The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gam Podcast Network is brought to Barn Fantasy. They bring offer for new customers. Pledge $50, get $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. And welcome everyone to the Tennis Gam Podcast here on the Sports Gam Podcast Network. It's currently Sunday evening, October 12th, around 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm Rosso Reichel once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into 3 upcoming events taking place over the next week. It's a couple of smaller events, but either way, all indoor hard courts. So weather will not be a factor, but it's definitely nice to see a couple of events going on at the same time. We have Almaty, we have Brussels, and we have Stockholm. 3 events starting on Monday. So we're going to get into the actual previews, outrights, etc., followed by lock and dog picks at the end of the show for the first round. Now, for the actual outrights, we do have quarter odds for Almaty. However, we have no quarters for Brussels and Stockholm, so we're not going to be covering quarters in those 2 events. So there we go. Anyway, before we get into the actual breakdown of those 3 events, I have to recap what happened in the last episode. Before we get into that, though, a reminder that you can also check out the Hockey Only Podcast. NHL is back, so is the Hockey Only Podcast. Join Ryan and Joel as they break down the biggest games, storylines, awards, and best bets throughout the season. Let it slide. So, getting into the recap of our picks from the last episode. Weird episode because we lost the lock and dog picks, but we called the match kind of perfectly, which sucks. We got too cute for the lock and dog. For the lock, ended up losing as we ended up having the first 6 games in the match 3-3 at minus 130. Vacherot missed a slam, and Reichel broke him pretty early on. It was unfortunate because it was the only time he broke him in the entire match, but either way, we ended up losing the first 6 games. For the dog, we did like the over 2.5 sets at around plus 150. However, we went for glory, did the same game parlay instead for the team totals for an extra 40 cents. Didn't work out as we ended up losing Reichel by a hook. Make matters worse, he was serving to get us the win there when he was down a break already in the 3rd set. Got broken again, and we lost by the hook for the Reichel team total as he finished with 12. So once again, picked up a loss for the lock and dog. For the actual match breakdown, though, we called Vacherot in 3. And Vacherot 1 in 3. So if you did not get too cute with me and you ended up taking the side or the total, you made money. So there you go. But either way, point is not a great job by me picking 2 plays that were a bit too creative, I'll use the word for, and we ended up losing both. But Vacherot, set history, became the worst ranked player ever in the ATP level to win a 1,000 title. So congrats to him. He went through qualifying, and I feel like most people never heard of him, but either way, he ended up making himself known. He goes from 204 to top 40 in the world, according to the live rankings. So congrats to him. He made, I believe, $1.1 million by making that Cinderella run. Ended up beating his cousin in a fun 3-setter. Now, for the actual match recap, Reichel, I said before, broke early against Vacherot, and that was it. He never broke again, and Vacherot served very well for the entirety of the match. In fact, the break that Reichel got in the second return game of the match was the only break point that he had in the entire match. Vacherot played very well. He won 70% of his first serve points, 73% of his second serve points, and Reichel was just not as good on the serve. I thought that Vacherot was the better player for especially the back half of the match. The right guy won. But either way, an all-time great story for a guy who really nobody ever heard of, who was mainly, I'd say, a challenger guy, now has a 1,000 title. So definitely a fun story. Congrats to him. As Reichel still looking for his first ever ATP title, we'll see if he can get one in the future. But a fun matchup that went down to the wire, and Vacherot was able to finish off the Cinderella run as he got the job done there in 3. So nice job by him. A nice job by Reichel as well to make it to the final. Nobody thought he would. And as a result, you got a fun final that ended up happening early on Sunday morning with the dog winning. So moving on into some other tennis news worth talking about. Ended up seeing Goff win against Pegula in the final of Wuhan. Congrats to her. Nice title. Pegula beat Sabalenka, then lost against Goff. Straight sets. Competitive, though. But either way, nice win there for Goff. So, moving on to the actual events taking place over the next week, starting off in Almaty. So this is going to be a matchup, or I should say an event that has a pretty limited history. In fact, only one time this event has been held previously in Almaty. It was held in Astana, and they moved it. So the courts might be of similar style, but it's not the exact same courts, I'd say literally speaking, as they ended up changing locations last year. But you saw Khachanov beat Diallo in the final last year. So for the actual quarters, reading off the odds for the first quarter, you have Khachanov trying to defend his title. You have at around plus 105. You have Moutet at 275. You have Struff at 7-1. You have Desir at 8-1. Tomic is at 12-1, made it through qualifying, as he ended up beating Husler in a pretty impressive war between the two of them, and he got the job done. He's 12-1. Shevchenko's at 12-1, and McDonald is at 12-1. A reminder that Almaty is in Kazakhstan, so if you want to actually back the local guy, you can go for Shevchenko, but I'm going to go with, I'd say, a bit of a bolder stance here in general. I'm not taking Khachanov. I know Khachanov won the title last year. I get that he's a good hardcore player. The form has just not been that great recently, and I think the draw can actually be a bit tricky for him. So I'll pass on Khachanov. Didn't really like the price. I know he has a bye in the first round, but I was kind of hoping for a bigger plus money play or price available for Khachanov, and it wasn't. So I'll pass on Khachanov. I do think that despite the fast-paced courts here in Almaty, I don't mind Moutet at 275. I think that his actual path is pretty favorable. Ends up having Tomic in the first round. Tomic, we know, is a head case. Moutet can frustrate him. Think he can win that one. Then Desir or Shevchenko. Similar story. Desir has not been good lately, and Shevchenko, we know, can have a bit of a short fuse. Moutet has been good over the course of the season. Had a good run there in BC a couple months ago. Think he can perform well here on hard court. Give me Moutet at 275 as my first choice for the first quarter. Moving on, I am going to try to back somebody who can capitalize off the fast-paced courts here in Almaty. I'm going to go with Struff. Now, I understand that Struff is not exactly a player who's been in great form for the entire season, but he's still a good hard-court player, a very good serve, has some volley skills as well. And against Khachanov, they faced off a couple of times. The only hard-court meeting, Struff did win. So I do like the head-to-head advantage there on hard court between them if they face off in the second round. I think 7-1 is a good price if you want to go for some longer shots in these random 250s. I don't mind it, but I think Struff with his serving skills, the fact that Diallo, well, I know it's kind of blossomed to being a very solid player, but last year was still a relative unknown, and he used his powerful serve to make it to the final. So based on that, I think Struff can do a similar thing here. Don't mind the 7-1. The fact that he already beat Khachanov on hard court in the only meeting between them on hard court tells me 7-1 might be a pretty generous price for a guy that could actually be live against the tournament favorite. So I don't mind Struff here at 7-1 as my longer shot for this one. Anyway, moving on to the second quarter here in Almaty. So for this quarter, you have Darderi as the favorite, which is blasphemous, separate story. He's at 175. You have Mickelson at 3-1. You have Kaza at 350. Vukic at 650. Mochizuki at 750. And then you have a couple of, I'd say, randos at 14-1. You have Zukayev if you want to go for the local Kazakhstan guy. And you have Topo, who was a qualifier. But Darderi, I know that he's been better on hard court lately. Him being favored in a quarter on hard court is egregious. Like, I just can't take that at 175. So I'm passing blindly on, once again, Darderi. I'll go for a more creative option. So I'm going to go with Kaza for one of my choices here. But I'm going to start with Mickelson at 3-1. I know he's been really bad in singles lately. I get it. But I do think that the path is actually favorable for him, especially if you're looking at the opponent's strength level that he has. So he has the local Kazakhstan guy. He has Zukayev, who has not been good lately either, and Mickelson's decent favorite in that one. Vukic, I think, could potentially be tricky on the fast hard courts here in Almaty, but we do know that Vukic is also not a consistent player, and Mickelson has been very good in head-to-head against him. I think Mickelson can extract enough errors by keeping the ball in play, and I do think that he's a bad matchup for Vukic. So based on that, I see a pretty decent path into what could be a matchup in the quarters against Darderi or Kaza. Darderi doesn't scare me. Kaza does, though, so I'll go for 350. I think Kaza is a solid hardcourt player. We know he ended up making a final or two this year. That was on clay. But he's still a good server, solid overall player, and I do think that he can showcase the good serve to potentially make a deep run. So I'll go with the two guys that I think make the quarterfinals in this quarter, and that way we might auto win if they face off against each other. So give me Mickelson at 3-1, mainly based on the draw. I'm aware the form is not pretty. I get it, but I like the draw for him. And I'll go with Kaza at 350. Think he's a talented young player who's pretty good on hard court. I'll take him as well at 350. Moving on to the third quarter in Almaty. For this one, you have Kaboli at 2-1, who's been in bad form as well. You have Diallo at 240. You have Jari at 3-1. Duckworth at 7-1. Blanchet at 8-1. You have Skatov at 9-1, and you have a complete unknown at 100-1 who has no chance in hell of winning the quarter. So Kaboli's been in bad form lately, but if you're looking at the actual draw, it's not bad. Now we know Jari's also a head case, so Jari might be the kind of guy who could wreck your entire bracket or could just lose immediately, and we'll go from there. But either way, I can't take Jari. I don't trust him enough, even though I recognize his serve can play well on the courts here in Almaty, but I'm not going to bother. Don't really think he's worth the headache. I'll go with Kaboli for the actual draw. I understand the form's not great, but I think this is a pretty weak quarter in general. I don't mind Kaboli at 2-1, and I'll throw in the runner-up from last year. Give me Diallo at plus, once again, 240. Think that he has the best draw of anybody for the actual quarter, so I prefer him over Kaboli, but I do think that I should take both just based on the talent level gap between those two and the rest of the actual quarter. Diallo has basically a bye in the first round, then Blanchet or Duckworth. Think he should look sharp in the event in general, so I'll go for the two favorites here. Not too creative. Give me Diallo at 240 and Kaboli at 2-1. Moving on to the final quarter here in Almaty, we have Medvedev, the only minus favorite in his quarter. Minus 150 for Medvedev, 5-1 for Nakashima. You have 550 on Morozin, 11-1 on Walton. You have 11-1 on Medjedovic. You have 16-1 on Schoolcat, and you also have 16-1 on Nardi. So Medvedev, we know, has been playing better lately. Still not making any finals, and the fact is he did make it to the semis in Shanghai before losing to Rinderknech. So he's been playing better. The draw, though, is pretty weak. You're looking at Medvedev followed by Nakashima. It's a really weak quarter. Even though I recognize he has not been getting the job done fully by winning events, Medvedev has been better recently, so I do think it's a pretty decent path for him to at least the semis. I'll take him at minus 150. I think it's interesting for the actual price. However, I don't trust him by himself because I do think Medvedev can lose. So I'll go for a guy with a pretty good draw, who I think maybe if he gets hot, can make it interesting. I don't mind the path for Morozin at 550. Has Nardi in the first round. You know my thoughts on him. Not a big fan of Nardi in general. But you have Nakashima against Medjedovic in the first round. Those guys might kill each other because they both are good servers and very bad returners. So I do think that could go either way. But Morozin can maybe feast on the scraps by getting a decent opponent in the first match, which is Nardi, who I think is a lot worse, obviously, than Medjedovic and Nakashima. So a bit of an easier path for him compared to the other people that he'd face in the second round. Don't mind the price there at 550. I'll go for him as my longer shot for the fourth quarter. Moving on to the outrights to actually win the entire event. So you got Medvedev at 210. You have Kashanov at 4-1. You have Diallo at around 9-1. You have Mutet at 11-1. Nakashima is around 14-1. You have Jari as well at 14-1. You have Darderi 14-1, Kaboli 14-1, Medjedovic 18-1, Morozin 22-1, Kaza 22-1, Mickelson 22-1. You kind of get the point. So to get into the actual odds for starters, I do think Medvedev's worth something. I found 250. I mentioned how easy the draw is in his immediate quarter, so I do think you're looking at a spot where he might be able to coast into the semis. If that happens, he might end up losing to Diallo. We'll see. But I do think that the quarter is favorable enough for him to be worthy of getting the favorite price tag for him. And 250 is not bad. I'll take him at 250 as my first choice, going pure chalk for the first person. However, I'm going to go a bit bolder for the other two options. I'll try to back the fast-paced courts here in Almaty. Give me Diallo, the runner-up at 16-1. Like the price, I think that for a guy who's a good server, who has been playing okay recently, think that he should be able to look sharp in a very easy draw as well for his quarter. If he faces off against Medvedev, that's fine. Then we get a guaranteed person in the final. But 16-1 for the defending runner-up. I said it was 9-1. I found a rogue price on 16-1, so I'll take it. I believe that was Bet Rivers that it's 16 to 1. But either way, I think it's a good price. I'll take him there as the rogue number at 16 to 1. And last but not least, you know what? I'll swing for it. Give me Struff at 35 to 1. Yes, he has Kashanov in the second round. I get it, but I do think his serve can play well enough. If he deploys enough serve and volley on the fast-paced courts here, he can be dangerous. So I think 35 to 1 is a good price for a guy that can maybe serve his way into a deep run. I'll take a flyer on it. Give me Struff at 35 to 1 as my last thought for Almaty outrights. Anyway, before we get into Stockholm, Aaron Monitor brought to you by our sponsor, MarketG. Using the bet on football, tennis, you have college football as well. You have baseball. You have the NBA coming up in about a week or so. So check that out as well. They have a model, which is very simple. Bet anything, anywhere, anytime. Use crypto for funding your account for deposit payouts. You can sign up for your new account. You can set SGPN for a special 100% bet back bonus of $100 for customers. Look at the G promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Novig, which is America's #1 prediction market for sports. You're also getting some great prices on Novig if you use it. Available in 35 plus states. Download the Novig app and get $50 when you spend just $5 if you use our promo code SGPN. Get on the actual Novig promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Camp Podcast. Finished going through the outrights for Almaty. Time to move on into Stockholm and Brussels. Once again, we have no quarter odds for these two events, so it should take shorter to actually get through. So, moving on to Stockholm. Recent winners. You saw Paul win last year against Dimitrov. You saw Monfils beat Kotov in an impressive comeback there 2 years ago. Saw Rune beat Tsitsipas and saw Paul beat Chapo. Now, Paul's not here because of injury, so we're not going to have a repeat champion in Stockholm. Now, for the actual outright odds, for the favorite in the event, let me just quickly pull it up for a sec. You have Rune at 275. You have Ruud at 275 as well. You have Greek Sport 12 to 1. Korda is at 12 to 1. Berrettini is at 12 to 1. Chapo's 12 to 1. Umber's at 14 to 1. So a bunch of guys in the same price range. You have two massive favorites with Rune and Ruud in their own section. Then a bunch of guys who can potentially win it in a pretty dark horse price range, I'd say. Kovacevic is at plus 2,000. Etcheverry is at 22 to 1. Mychik is 22 to 1 as well. Fuksovic's 25 to 1. Sonego is at 25 to 1. Fernley 25 to 1. And you have Kikmanovic at around 28 to 1. Popyrin is at 28 to 1 as well. And that's basically it. If you want to go for the super long shot who won a title last year on hard court, Cilic is at 35. Cilic is at 50 to 1. And Mueller actually won a title this year on hard court. That is at plus 5,000. So, Stockholm, out of the three events, according to projections and the serving numbers that I looked up, Stockholm is the slowest pace court out of the three events that we have this week. It's not super slow. I'd say it's relatively average, but it is projected to be slower than Almaty and than Brussels. So, rallying should be favorable for a lot of players here. And the history suggests it with Paul winning twice, with Monfils making it. Kotov made the final here. Rallying does have its, I'd say, benefits for this event. So keep that in mind when you actually look at the outright. So for my picks for the outrights, said before, you have a couple of favorites who I'm not thrilled with Rune and Ruud. However, I do think the draw for Rune is actually quite nice. I can't stand Rune. I think he's a complete head case, but 325, I don't mind it. That was on Bet Rivers. I think it's a good price. I'll take that as my only favorite choice for this one. Does have potentially Fuksovic's in the second round, but the biggest opponent in his section based on ranking is Mueller. It's a very favorable draw for Rune to make it into the semis. And you're also looking, in general, you're looking at the other quarter beneath them. You have Umber, Berrettini. They're against each other in the second round, so that's a pretty favorable draw for Rune as well. I just think his half is a gift. And with that being said, I think you're looking at a good spot for Rune to potentially make a deep run, not even based on playing well, but just based on how bad the actual quarter is that he's in. I don't mind it at 325. Think it is definitely an option. So I'll go with him as my only favorite here. Moving on to the other options, though, I am going to go with somebody in that 12 to 1 price range. I'm going to go with Chapo. I do understand that he is extremely volatile, and his form's been very up and down all season, but historically, he's been very good here. He won the title in 2019, made the final in 2021. Should have won again, actually. He choked pretty badly against Paul in 2021, but two-time finalist. The fact is his draw is not bad either. Shapo, looking at the actual path, has a bye, then Ofnor or Borg. Yes, that is Bjorn Borg's son. He stinks, but either way, Shapo should have an easy path into the quarters. His number one opponent here is Griekspoor. Fernley can be tricky. Griekspoor, we know fitness-wise, is not great. I think Shapo has a decent path as well, and I think it's a pretty decent overall spot for Shapo at 12-1 with a ton of success, historically speaking, at the event. So I'm going to go with him at 12-1. If you noticed, I picked a couple of guys who can go down in flames, but I really did not see many super long shots I was intrigued by. So I went for the guys with upside with, in my opinion, very favorable draws. For the last option, though, I went with somebody who has a pretty difficult draw, actually, but he's a very good, historically speaking, indoor hardcourt player. I have Humbert at 16-1. When you have Rune and you have Ruud as your two tournament favorites in hardcourt, you can get creative. And I think Humbert is a creative option. Yes, I understand Berrettini can be dangerous. He's also not played in matches recently since injury, and we do know that Humbert has multiple titles on hardcourt indoor in his career. I believe he has 4. It's either 3 or 4 indoors, so this is kind of his bread and butter. And I do think that Berrettini, who can easily lose to anybody based on fitness, he could retire at any moment. I do think that Humbert has a difficult path, but I think it's manageable. And if he gets past Berrettini, he has either Kovacevic, Sonego, or Ferry. Not a bad path. I think Humbert could beat Rune as well. It's upside based, but I think 16-1 for a guy with 3 or 4 indoor hardcore titles before. I think it makes sense for him to potentially make a good run here at 16-1. It's been a really rough couple of months for Humbert, but I do think the price is favorable. I'll take it as my last choice for the outrights in once again Stockholm. So my picks once again, I'm going to go with Rune at 325. I'm going to go with Shapo at 12-1, and I will go with Humbert at 16-1. If you skip those 3 based on how psychotic all 3 of those players are, I understand, but I was going to break it down. I was going to break down every event anyway, so I'll go for those 3 and move on. Moving on to Brussels. So for the recent history, I will point out that it was in Antwerp in previous years. This is the first year this event's being held in Brussels. Pretty similar story to Almaty, what happened last year when they moved from Astana. Should be following a similar, I'd say, court style. Will it be the exact same? I don't know. So we're going to find out. But either way, it should play pretty fast. Antwerp was the fastest out of the 3 events based on last year's numbers. So we'll see if that continues in Brussels. But either way, should be a relatively fast-paced court if it sticks to what Antwerp tried to do when they hosted the event. So recent winners, Agut ended up beating Leheshka in the final last year. Bublik beat Fies. You saw Felix beat Korda, and Sinner ended up beating Schwartzman. So for the actual outright options here, for the favorite, you end up having Felix at 3-1. You have Musetti at 450, Leheshka at around 550, the defending runner-up. Fekina at 650, Fonseca at 11-1. Bonzi is at 2,000. You have De Zoomer at 28-1. You have Agut, defending champion, 25-1. Halles 25-1. Altmaier 28-1. Arnaldi 28-1. Bergs is at around plus 2,000. I see Pericard at 28-1. Opelka 28-1. Comasanda 33-1. Gofen, if you want to go for the home country, Belgian, you can't get the veteran at around 33-1. Basically it. So, for starters, Felix, we know, had a pretty good run in Shanghai. Didn't work out as he lost to Rinderknech, who went God mode, so it is what it is. But Felix was playing pretty well in the first couple rounds, and I do think with his serve and the fact that he's a good indoor hardcore player, saw him win the title in Montpellier earlier this year, and that was indoor hardcourt. I think that's decent overall, I'd say, conditions for Felix, and looking at the actual draw for Felix, I do think it is a pretty favorable path. He has De Zoomer or Cena in the second round post-bye. He does have Fonseca or Dzanchulp. We'll see who wins that one. Fonseca, though, has been overpriced all year, and he hasn't done anything. I know that he won a clay title, but on hard court, he keeps being priced like he's a serious threat, and he hasn't really done anything. I think Felix is going to overwhelm him, and I think Felix is in a pretty good quarter to make some noise. The third quarter, though, I think is very weak. You have Fekina, who he knows never won a title in his career. You have Giron and Bellucci. You have Gofen, Comasanya, and Bergs and Calignon. So if Felix does get out of that quarter, I think he'll be a decent favorite in the matchup in the semis, unless, Fekina's in good form and maybe the price is close. Felix would be favored, though, over Fekina in a potential matchup there in the semis. But I'll go for the favorite here. I'll go for Felix at plus 320. Indoor hard court, he's very good on indoor hard court. Forgot the exact number, a record from, I think it was a year ago we mentioned it. But his numbers in indoor hard court, wins and losses, are filthy. I think it's a good spot for Felix at plus 320. Now I'm going to go with chalk once again. I am going to go with Lehecka at 6-1 to get some revenge from losing the final last year. I like his draw a lot. He has a bye, then Altmaier probably in the second round. Same quarter as Opelka, Bonzi, Baez, and Agut, but they would play against each other first. So we'll see who ends up getting out of that. But Lehecka could get revenge potentially in the quarters if he faces off against Agut again. But either way, I think Lehecka played pretty well in Shanghai. Like Felix, he did end up losing to Rinderknech, but I thought he could serve well. And with the pace of the courts here that's projected, good hardcourt player in general. I think Lehecka can perform well in this event. Now, for the other favorites, though, I'm skipping Musetti. I understand he's played well in hardcourt lately, but I'm just not interested. He feels like he's going to always be a bridesmaid. He's so close and yet doesn't get across the finish line, and I do think that Musetti at 450 is too cheap. I will pass on him there. Fekina, 650, I can't take. Price is too short for a guy who's never won a title before, and I'm not a fan of his draw entirely because he would have Felix in the semis. I'll pass on Fekina there, but I do like as my favorites, Felix at around 320 and Lehecka at 6-1. Segueing into my long shot for the event, I had a Freudian slip there. It is going to be Perricard at plus 3,000. I understand he's been quite bad this season. I get it, but it's indoor hard court. We know last year around this time he started dominating because his serve is borderline unbreakable. And if the courts play that fast in Brussels like they did in Antwerp, that's going to be tough to beat. Now he has Rusevori in the first round, who's barely played because of injury. Hallis in the second round, who has not been good this season. You're looking at Musetti. I know Musetti's owned Perricard. He ended up going to a third set against them last time out. But with the pace of the courts, I think Perricard can maybe make some noise, and I think 3,000 for the best server in the world, arguably, I think has some value. I'll go for Perricard as my super long shot here at plus 3,000. Weirder things have happened, but give me the serve bot on indoor fast hard courts to potentially win an event. He did it last year in Basel, maybe does it this year in Brussels. Give me Perricard at plus 3,000 as my long shot outright. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the outrights in the three events for Almaty, for Stockholm, and for Brussels. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks for the first round. Before we get into the lock and dog picks, a reminder brought to you by our sponsor, Arctic Fantasy. Play Fans Pick'em. Chance to 500 times your entry. Pick higher or lower on favorite player stats. Available for a ton of different sports as well. NFL, college football. You can also use tennis. You could use NBA, NHL, bunch of different sports. Also, a new offer for new customers. Play just $5, get $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. They're off to great center in college football and the NFL. They're giving away weekly cash prizes just for tracking your bets in the app. Track 5 bets of the same type for an all that you build, and you can win $1,000. Plus, we have a nice promo code discount with Rhythm. Use code SGPN25 when you download the Rhythm app for quarter first month. Now, Rhythm, once again, promo code SGPN25. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the outrights for the three events. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, we have a pretty good matchup on the card for Almaty. We have Nakashima taking on Medjedovic. Give me the Nakashima team total over 12.5 at minus 115. Caesars went completely rogue on the line here at minus 115. Caesars tends to have the best actual pricing for team totals for players. So check it out. I do think you can use that to your advantage. But the point is, DraftKings has the same exact team total at minus 165. You're saving 50 cents by shopping around. No questions asked. I'll take advantage of that deal. Now, I said before, Courts and Almaty were fast last year. Then they should play fast again. Both players are good servers. I can see a lot of holding here. And I do think we'll get at least 175 or 7-6. The recent matches suggest the same. There's been a 7-5 or 7-6 set in 6 of Nakashima's last 8 matches, and there's been a 7-5 or 7-6 set in 5 straight Medjedovic matches, including the retirement against Rinderknech. He did have a 7-6 in the first set. So based on that, I think you'll end up seeing it at least 1-7-5, 7-6. Nakashima, though, is decent favorite, and he's a massive price to win a set. Think that he can get there in a couple of ways, whether he wins or loses. We saw them face off last year in Belgrade on hard court. Nakashima actually lost in 3 sets, but he went over, ended up landing 14 for his team total. So based on that, I think Nakashima can get their win or lose. Think it might be close, but either way, I do think taking the favorite to win a set and it being relatively close at a minus 115 price tag, a rogue number is a great deal. I'll take it as my lock for the show. For my dog, I'm going to go to the matchup between I'm going to go with Kovacevic taking on Carabelli. And for this one, I'm going to fade Ugo Carabelli. I am going to go with Kovacevic in straight sets here, which I think is a very good overall price. Now, for the actual number, it is even money, which I think is generous. Now, Kovacevic has not been good lately. However, he's been playing, I'd say, decent ATP events, whether it's 500s or 1000s, and he's been facing off against good opponents, and he's lost early. So it is what it is, but he's a hard court specialist. He made 2 ATP title matches this year on hard court in Montpellier and in Los Cabos. And the fact is, Ugo Carabelli has been getting his ass kicked regularly on hard court recently. He's lost 7 of his last 8 matches on hard court, not including the Ottman retirement after 8 games. But you're looking at him losing 7 of his last 8 hard court matches, and one common theme, he did not win a set in any of those 7 losses. When he loses big. Kovacevic, though, I think should look sharp. I think that Stockholm, with it being indoors, should work to Kovacevic's play style, and I do think he should end up beating the clay specialist in straight sets. Mainly based on the price, though, I think even money fading Carabelli blindly on hard court has some merit. Kovacevic, though, who is against a weak opponent, and the fact is he is a 2-time ATP finalist this year, I think it's a great spot for him to get the job done here quickly. Give me him in straight sets as my dog for the show. So once again, the lock and dog picks for the show. Lock's going to be on Nakashima. Team total over 12.5 games at minus 115. For the dog, give me Kovacevic. Straight sets against Ugo Carabelli at even money. It's going to wrap it up for the show. I'm a bit busy, though, this week, so I will not be available for the quarters, but I'll be back for the semis in Almaty, Stockholm, and Brussels. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.